couple of weeks ago, I gave the initial data that had been picked up and the common phrases and terms that have been picked up on the data mining on the first round of dreams you sent me. And what happened was only two things really stood out that were repeated more than twice. One was four people, I think it was either three or no, it's four, said they had a dream about Barcelona and they'd never been there. Now we got a 100% hit on that because there was the other day there was a weird shooting in the tourist district of Barcelona that made world headlines. A friend of mine who's there at the moment, I'm not lying, just contacted me tonight and told me that it is a bit of a weird story. She actually went there with her kids when the thing started on the day, literally right before the shootings, or after the shootings happened. Gunmen went into a posh restaurant and it looked like at first it was reported as a kidnapping that went wrong. Then they hunted them down like terrorists, but it was a big story. And then later on, they said it was a gangland hit, but no one. It's still no one knows. It may well have been politically motivated. Remember, the Catalan there is elements in the Catalan who want freedom from Spain, and there's also political interest there as well. And so, but that was a hit. We actually got that. Now, what's amazing about that is that you guys did this. You guys delivered this. I'm not like some shithead around the Ouija board making up stories about getting messages from myself in the future, making predictions. I'm not channeling. I'm not one of these types. It's nothing even to do with me. All I'm doing, and it's totally unbunkable. Just listen to the show. You guys said that there was going to be an event in Barcelona that would make the world, and there was. So it's undebunkable. It's absolutely so. Well done, you guys. And my feeling about this stuff is that the more we do it, the more accurate we will get. Because I discovered that with my dream journals over the years when I've been doing them, is that you might get one or two close revelations within a week or two, but after, say, 6 months, a whole narrative and a picture evolves that blows your mind. So we're embarking on something fantastic here. Absolutely fantastic. So we made two predictions, you guys. Your first premonition in your dreams was something to do with China. We don't know if anything happened. It doesn't look like it. It's a tricky one because China is such a powerful country today. And Barcelona. We got an absolute hit with Barcelona. China, we don't know, but we'll see what goes on. So it's incredible. It's just incredible. So about 6 or 7 people emailed me at the same time when the Barcelona event took place. We never hear much on the news internationally about Barcelona. This got major news worldwide. I think because the initial kidnapping or the hit was on somebody very important and they played it down. Maybe even a member of the Spanish royal family. We don't know. Now, this week, we'll do it every 2 weeks. So this 2-week prediction or premonition you guys had, I ran through them all last night. I was up till late going through the data mining and looking for constants. And thank you so much for sending your dream data in. And yes, we've had some hits. Now, China is still huge again. I don't know what's going on there, but China is huge again on this 2-week, this bi-week frame. It's huge again. I don't know why. People are dreaming about being in China. People are dreaming about seeing Chinese people. People are dreaming about. They're not negative. They're not positive. Some are negative. Some are positive. Most are just an awareness of Chinese things. Some people have dreamt about Chinese monsters like demons, like the one that went after what's his name, Bruce Lee. So China is still really, really strong in this experiment. And that this week again was biggest, and it was the biggest in the last 2 weeks ago as well. So we'll let this run for 2 weeks, and then I'll keep gathering your latest dream data, and we'll come back in 2 weeks. But we got a definite hit on Barcelona. The second one is buses. About 7 people specifically mentioned bus journeys, and specifically mentioned bus journeys. Now they were all the same. They were very interesting. The bus journeys had a constant that the destination was never arrived at. Some people had a dream they were on the bus, and the bus never went to the stop they wanted it to go to. And it's unusual. People don't usually dream about buses. They most constantly dream about trains a lot, or planes. Another one was one person said they went to get on the bus at the bus stop, and the bus driver refused to take his fare and let him on the bus. And other ones, there was 2 other ones where people were waiting for buses. One of them, the bus never came, and the other, an empty bus went by them without stopping. So that's the theme. People have been. That's the new theme this week that I've seen, the constant. People have been dreaming. You guys have been dreaming about buses that don't get to their destination or don't pick up their passengers. You either are on the bus and you don't get where you want to go, or you try to get on the bus, it doesn't arrive, it drives past the bus stop, or the bus driver doesn't let you on. So interesting. So I mean, I'm not saying it's going to happen. We got lucky. We probably got lucky with the Barcelona thing, but who knows? In the 2-week time frame. But in 2 weeks from now, let's look now. Keep an eye on China, see if something's simmering there. But also, and it's bloody strong how the China thing is coming in there. And also keep an eye on the buses. Let's hope there's nothing terrible happens, like there's a bus crash or some people die, or unless it's a busload of politicians goes over a cliff, then that's great. As long as the bus driver escapes. But let's hope it's something not like that. But it is very significant, the whole thing of it not reaching its destination. That's tremendous. Not all the dreams, in one way or another, it was an unfulfilled. In every way, actually, all of them. The bus journey itself was unfulfilled. That sounds very powerful to me. So we watch the buses, or we watch for bus stories in the media in the weeks to come. So that's it. Keep an eye on China and watch the buses. Now, keep the stories coming into me. Even though I can't answer most of you, I can't answer them. I appreciate your email, and I copy and paste it. The thing is to keep it as succinct as possible. So, hi Thomas, I was thinking about this. Thomas, I was thinking about that. I want that. Thomas, just begin the email. Say, Thomas, here's my latest dream. Write the dream out, and that's the end of it. I don't need to know what you had for dinner, what you were thinking about. I just want the dream data itself. I mean, most of you have been very good, and you've been very good that way. That's exactly what you've done. But keep that one going. I'm really appreciating that, because I'm not aware of anything like this. Oh, maybe it has been done. I mean, in the past, I'm not aware of anything like this ever been done that I know of. That has ever been done like this in the world of radio. And thank you again for listening in enormous numbers. It's the whole program since it started on sleep and dreaming. It just is, the show is just, the numbers have just jumped through the roof. Now, the theme for tonight's show was originally going to be, and I'll get into that starting now, Mary Shelley's book Frankenstein, or The Modern Prometheus. Now, this book is quite remarkable, but there are lots of synchronicities and things that speak to us about today's world. And this is the thing about the most powerful art of all, that it's when art is truly great, it has several things in common. Firstly, it's produced by an unlikely person. Secondly, it's usually attacked or savaged by the critics of the day. And thirdly, it becomes almost like a a culture changer. It changes the world. It's an act of magic. It is the true craft. And Mary Shelley's Frankenstein covers all that. Now, the story of the story of the creation of the tale of the novel itself is amazing. Now, even though it was written by Mary Shelley, who was married to Percy Shelley, and it's very much a European, a Germanic novel. It's very much, and this Mary Shelley was well known for writing travelogues, and she was an expert on traveling through Germany and through Central Europe. But even though she's a British writer, it's very, very much a Germanic story. And my interest, my re-interest in the novel derived from my part of my enormous amount of work putting into the Walpurgis Night series of books that takes me all kinds of places. And the links and the dots and everything, they connect like you would not believe. And so the book, well, Mary Shelley, along with Lord Byron, John Polidori, who was also a writer, as you know, Byron was right, and her husband Percy Shelley, began traveling through Europe in 1814. They went. This was the beginning of the Grand Tour. This is also the same time during the Romanticism era when Turner went to Europe. Roads had been greatly improved by Napoleon's conquest of Europe, and so traveling was safer, especially after the Battle of Waterloo. It was safer English people to travel through Europe. And so she journeyed along the Rhine, the river in Germany, which I've done myself, and she came to a place called Frankenstein's Castle. Now, Frankenstein's Castle really does exist, and it's in a part of Germany that I only briefly visited, but I want so much to go back there. It's in the Odenwald, and it's a mountain range. It's the soul of the Germanic soul. And those of you who've read my book, Walpurgis Night, how I talk about the gestation of the Teutonic Hexan, that occultic aspect of the Germanic soul, which was gestated within the brooding and deep and dark forests of the Saxon and pagan and early Germanic, Druidic soul took place in those mountains, in those forests. It is the epitome of that. And the area is absolutely saturated with mythology, stories of wild women that are, like a kind of a female version of the Green Man, of werewolves, of vampires, of the devil living in one particular part of the mountain range. It's very similar to the Ohio Valley in West Virginia, Ohio, where the Mothman and all that takes place. It's one of those hotspots, and it's one of those places where they're very ancient. In the case of the Ohio Valley, the Indians, the natives, and the immigrants, Scots, Irish, Germans, and so on. Well, the same thing in this part of Germany, in the Odenwald, and that's where Frankenstein's is located. A place of tremendous, even to this day, supernatural influence. Now, in 1673, an alchemist called Johann Conrad Dippel lived in the castle. He was born there, and he was a professional alchemist by birth, and he created something called Dippel's oil, which was an animal oil, which was an animal-based process of oil that was the elixir of life. So the idea was that this guy Dippel, through his interest in both anatomy and alchemy, had created an oil that would allow him to reanimate the dead. And so Mary Shelley was in this castle, so there you can see the gestation was in there. Now, another thing that happened at that period was that there was also something that was all the rage then, and it was called it was along with it was called galvanism. And galvanism was firing electric shocks into dead bodies, mainly animals, and they were discovering through galvanism, they were discovering how the nervous system worked. The first initial experiments were done with a frog's legs. It's quite famous, but they were also firing large electric shocks into dead bodies to try and reanimate them. And so it wasn't a brand of science, it was a brand of occult. You see, when Mary Shelley created Frankenstein, science didn't even really exist. You had natural philosophy, and it was going to be a long time before Louis Pasteur and all these types of people who really, brought science to the fore were to come along. Science as we know it didn't exist back then. There was alchemy, and then there was natural philosophy. And so it's the first science fiction novel. That's the most amazing thing about it. The first work of science fiction was created by Mary Shelley on this tour with these other figures of the Gothic movement. Now, how the book came about was let's go through the timeline. In 1814, they began a journey, and by 1816 they were living in Switzerland and inside in Germany, and that 1816 was when the book was written. Now, the book came out of a competition out of their boredom to try and create the best ghost story. And Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein out of this competition between the four of them, best horror story. And she had this dream. The book began as a dream while they were in this lodge house. They were staying at this place. Now, what makes that really interesting is it happened in 1816, and 1816 is a very significant year because it was known as the year without a summer. What happened was there had been a major volcano I think it was in Indonesia or in the Philippines, in that part of the world, Southeast Asia, that had covered the whole earth in a volcanic ash. And so you had the world shrouded in what was a Gothic mist. This is why Turner's paintings also have those incredible sunsets, because the residue from the fallout from the volcano hung in the air forever. If you I went to visit the Tate Britain in London there a few years back and looked at Turner's sketchbooks that he'd done in Hyde Park and around London of the sunsets, and they're incredible. And this was because of the particles in the air. It also created fog banks that hung over the British Isles and hung over places like Yorkshire. And the fog was constant. And this is where the Gothic novel came from. The whole Gothic culture shrouded in the mist during this year without a summer. It just goes to show you how a volcano on the other side of the world can actually trigger enormous changes in culture. During this year without a summer, it was cold and it was foggy, and it gave birth to Frankenstein. And so she wrote the story, and they agreed it was the best, came back to England, and the book was initially published anonymously. The second edition had her name on it, because there was prejudice against female writers back then, especially a young woman writing a book like this, and it got horrific reviews that only a sick mind could have come up with. The usual things. You always know greatness because it gets attacked by the establishment of its day. But the character of Victor Frankenstein, which develops in it, is an interesting allegory for a lot of the things in the world today. In the book, he's born in Naples to a wealthy Geneva family. And that ties in with the whole Templars thing and Octagon and the black nobility. His name is Frankenstein, and that comes from the Rock of the Franks. The Franks were the ones who Christianized Europe by the sword. They killed the Saxons at Verdun, the bloody verdict. Victor represents a character who's obsessed with everything. Now, he goes to the University of Ingolstadt, which is interesting because that's where Adam Weishaupt and the Bavarian Illuminati originated from. So it ties in all these different things, and he creates a monster. Now, the style that the book is written in is very interesting. It's called an epistolary form, and what that is, it basically documents letters between Captain Robert Wilson and his sister Margaret Walton Somerville about their experiences in the North Pole, and that becomes significant later. The creature is never referred to by any name. It's always called the monster, the vile thing, except in a reading of it that Mary Shelley gave once, where she called him Adam, like Adam and Eve, and that was kind of interesting. But the story itself, the creature is basically a deformed, because Frankenstein is not that is as great a genius as he thinks he is, and his access to bodies is so limited that because of all the limitations by stitching and gluing the body together and the organs, the creature ends up 8 feet tall and hideously deformed. And what happened was, I spoke about this in Defeated Demons, that Frankenstein was obsessed with his idea of creating the absolute perfect man, absolute perfection. And in the end, he ended up with a hideous monster. The hideous monster also was resentful for his creation. Now, in the films, it's done by electricity. In the book, it's not. It's done by a kind of an undetailed chemical description. But the creature, which is around 8 feet tall, becomes the shadow. See, for a young woman to have written this back in those days. The woman was an absolute genius on every level, and also the fact that she was guided by dreams, and this is what we're all talking about now, isn't it? Dreams. That his quest for perfection had created a shadow in his own life. So there's all kind of metaphors there. And during the book, they come together, fall apart, and at one point the monster's living in the mountains, and he wants Frankenstein to make him a female mate. The monster has learned to speak language because he's lived near a family, and he listened to them every day, and he tried to be friends with the family and became terrified of how he looked, and so on. So the creature demands a female companion from him, and he agrees, and so on, but it never happens. There's a kind of a race goes on, while while Frankenstein has to go to the Orkney Islands off Scotland, to make the female monster. He has all these weird nightmares and premonitions that he might be breeding a master race that could plague mankind. Just think about this. 1816, this woman was coming up with this. So he destroys the female monster, and then he runs away, ends up in Ireland, is arrested for a murder of a friend. He's acquitted, returns back home, and the monster follows him. But what's really interesting about this, the monster also kills his fiancée, Elizabeth. So it's the shadow thing again. So it kills the beauty in him by trying to create perfection. But this was done before science was invented. And Mary Shelley was, in this narrative form of this book, was outlining the neuroses of the scientist that we see today. Because at the very end of the novel, Victor Frankenstein develops a neuroses about the North Pole where the monster lives. And he's obsessed with killing his creation in the North Pole. So the book ends in the North Pole. But it's almost like science today has ended in the North Pole, because they backed everything into this global warming thing, and they said that the ice sheets would be long melted by now. And this year we have the largest ice sheets ever. And the insanity of modern science is seen within the minds of not only these scientists who say, we have the greatest war, the world is in danger of boiling, but they've also had this neuroses about the North Pole in the past. And they've also had this neuroses about global dimming. The Year Without a Summer from a volcano. It's almost like she created an alchemical work in the book of Frankenstein that predicted the neuroses of modern science, transhumanism, genetic engineering, and neuroses about global warming and ice caps melting, and neuroses about the ice caps expanding, and neuroses about global dimming. It really is absolutely remarkable. And the way it's told from the narrative of a story of a ship's captain. Now, we spoke about earlier on the show how a lot of you guys had been sitting around and you had these dreams, and yet she had this dream of the future. And in her dream, she noted that I saw a pale student of the unhallowed arts kneeling beside the thing he had put together. I saw the hideous phantasm of a man stretched out, and then, on the working of some powerful engine, show signs of life, and steer with an uneasy half-vital motion. Frightful it must be, for supremely frightful would be the effect of any inhuman endeavours to mock the stupendous mechanism of the creator of the world. She's giving us a warning right there about transhumanism, and she's giving us a warning right there about genetic alteration. In 1816, in the year without a summer, and this is the year without a summer, isn't it? It's for so many of us. And that'll be next year. That book will be 200 years old next year. And 1916 was the year without a summer. You had the worst parts of the First World War. You had the horrors of Verdun. The Somme was 1916. All the battles on the Eastern and the Western Front. Russia fell apart and began to fall apart in 1916. Led to the Soviet Revolution. And here we are, coming up to 2016 next year. And I think we're going to see some very powerful world changes, because Mary Shelley's Frankenstein proved beyond the shadow of a doubt that all art is magic and all magic is art. So keep dreaming that dream. Send me your dream stories and take part in magic. Thank you very much. Have a good evening, and feck 'em if they can't take a joke.